There is a tendency for us as real estate agents to want to offer help and advice in every single situation. And the heart behind why we want to do that, the heart behind why when a client asks us a question, we want to be able to answer that is genuine, right? We care about our consumer and we want to help them. We want to represent them well. We want to do what we can, everything we possibly can do to represent our clients well. Okay. As real estate agents, that's what we desire to do. The problem with this, and this is what I see over and over again, is that zeal to protect the client and the consumer overshadows our competence. Okay. And go with me here is we are skilled in certain aspects of our industry. We are trained in certain aspects of our industry, and we know certain things about our industry extremely well. There are other areas of our industry, though, that we've not had enough experience to be able to speak into. And that's where I'm leaning into. Most of the trouble that real estate agents get themselves into is in regards to speaking outside of the realm of what they fully understand. And all the calls that I typically will get if someone is struggling or typically a little late in the game, they should have called me before, but they offered advice that they didn't fully understand. And then the client receives that advice and acts upon that advice. And then it ultimately ends in the real estate agent getting into trouble because they gave advice to information of stuff they did not fully understand. And when we do that, we open ourselves up to major liability. So what I'm wanting to say before we even start the show today is, as real estate agents, we need to make sure that we stay in our lane of what we fully understand. And when we speak and when we say things, even if it's in regards to our consumer or how we respond to other agents and other brokers, the vendors we work with, if we're going to have a conversation with them, we're going to speak into that situation with a matter of fact verbiage, we need to make sure that we fully understand what we are saying when we make statements, right? Because if we do not fully understand, we enter into that arena, we're opening ourselves up for major, major problems. And so what I caution you with is do not feel like you have to have the answer for every single question that you are asked. You do not. You want to be able to listen, pay attention, and learn, but you want to take that information. If you don't understand, it is okay to simply say, that is a good question. I'm not really sure. It's a new one for me, but I've got a whole team behind me that can help me with this. Let me make some calls because I want to make sure that I answer that correctly to represent you well, right? It is 100% okay to make that kind of statement. And if there is any inkling in your mind where you do not fully understand something, the best thing you can do is that right there, right? Don't just speak into a situation. And I will add this one final note and we'll jump into the show is a really good agent. An agent that I have noticed goes on and makes a lot of money and grows a strong business is the one that before they do anything, before they say anything they don't understand, they'll give me a call, they'll give another broker a call, they'll give other agents that have been in the situation a call, they'll consult attorneys, they will consult lenders, inspectors, they will seek the answers. Not only out of the guise of trying to build themselves up to fully understand their industry and their craft and what they are talking about, but ultimately to service that client and that consumer extremely well. And as real estate agents, that is true professionalism. If we do not fully understand something, we do not speak as a matter of fact into it. We go and take that to somebody that does, and we go back to our client with the verbiage from somebody that understands it. So if you want to get into trouble, don't heed my advice. I'm being dead serious. This is where most agents fall into trouble. They don't ask enough questions, they don't listen enough, and then they don't seek answers from true professionals of that lane, right? So with all that being said, I say all this because of the amount of calls I'm getting. It's after the fact. It's like they've now already said things, and now we're trying to clean up the mess and trying to navigate a more difficult situation that didn't have to be that way, right? So I say that just as a cautionary tale to you to be good at your job, but be professional by seeking answers when you don't fully understand, right? that's what we are called to do. That is being a true professional. All right, there's my soapbox for the day. I felt like that just needed to be said just as a reminder. We're all guilty of it. It's not condemnation. It's just a fact, right? We have got to go and get answers where we need to get answers from professionals. All right, Joey, the mortgage guy. Hey, thank you for being here, man. I appreciate you stopping in and checking out the live stream. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into the show. Thank you guys, as always, for being here. And let's make sure everything's set. Yep, looks like everything's good. All right, let's begin. Welcome to the Real Estate Brief. I'm Adam. Today, we are going to be cutting through the noise. We're going to get to the truth that we can find inside of the news. We're going to look at the data, what is being said, and ultimately come to some kind of conclusion based on the facts. And we can do that by observing what is being said, using our logical minds, using wisdom to come to the conclusion where we believe that we can find the truth. Not necessarily 100%, but get close. But at the same time, if we take our time reading these news articles, we are going to be able to find opportunity in every single headline, every single article that we read. I truly believe that there is opportunity for real estate agents to glean from those new articles to be able to apply it to their business and to better serve their clients. So if you're ready to gain your real estate edge, let's dive into our very first story, right? Now, this first one is actually not going to be a story. So this is actually going to be talking about just the mortgage rates real quick. So right now, the interest rate sitting today is the 30-year fixed rate is sitting at about 6.16. That's where we're at today. So 6.16%. I will just highlight this. If you look at the trend here, you'll see 2018. You'll see where we kind of are way down here, really, really low, right? I mean, look at 2020 down in the 3s, and the 15s were 2.5. Extremely low. And then we get into 2022, and then that whole entire year, things just begin to spike up. Why? Oh, well, it's inflation, right? We had massive amount of inflation. Prices were going through the roof, and the affordability gap was just getting broader and broader and broader. They had to do something, right? So that's what they did. They did that to curb the inflation. All right. So we did hover around that 6 to 6.5% for a while, and we dropped down just a little bit there, 6.39. And then we get into like November 13th of 2023, and we get up to like almost 8%, right? Now, I'm just going to hover. If I can get it to stay right there for just a second, all right? If we can just, you know what, right there. That's close enough, okay? Here's why I'm pointing this out. If you look at my screen, and sorry, TikTok, you can't see my screen, but right now I'm hovering over the date, October 9th of 2023, okay? So keep in mind, 2023. And October 9th, so that's fall of 2023, we are right around 7.64%. So we were almost at 8%. All right. If we go back just a little bit farther, we go back here to, let's see, 2022, February of 2022. All right. October 31st of 2022, we were at 7.2. So if you are an agent and you have been in business for at least 4 years, 4 to 5 years, and you've sold properties, this lock-in effect that we keep talking about, where people have these low interest rates that you see down here on this graph to the far left back in 2020 up to 2022, all right, that lock-in effect is getting less and less of an issue because we're going back now 4 years and people are at 7.2% interest. So if somebody bought a house 4 years ago and almost five, they are not in that low interest rate where they're locked in. So time is healing the wound of that lock-in effect, right? Because if somebody had bought back then in 2022, October 31st of 2022, and it's a 7.2% interest rate, and now we're sitting at 6.16, that is a sweet spot to go talk to those buyers that bought those houses, right? Because there are a couple things. One is they could refinance and save a little bit. If they're at over 7% interest rate, this is a good time for them to refinance. If you can knock that down a whole percentage point, they're going to be saving money. So that's a good conversation to be having with your previous clients, right? And then the second thing is we're getting closer to that average life expectancy of someone living in their home, right? Or not life expectancy, man, it sounds like I was killing them off. I mean, the average time that someone lives in their house, 5 years, right? So they typically live in their house 5 to 6 years. We are approaching that moment when their higher interest rate meets the lower interest rate of what we have now, where they're not locked in. So just keep this in mind. Like, it's a good time to be going back, talking to those clients and see if we want to put the house on the market. This is the opportunity. So when we start reading headlines and we're starting going through all the news and all the economy and what everybody's saying about everything, like, there is a massive opportunity right now that is right in front of us, and we need to take advantage of this. We need to be actively involved in this. All right. So just keep that in mind. But that's where we're sitting at 6.16. Okay. That's where we're at. All right. Let's jump into now the actual first story. I thought we'd just share the interest rate first and foremost, and then we're going to get into the actual story. Quick swig of coffee. All right. So here we are. This article here, sorry, it's got ads everywhere. It'll scroll away once I go up here. But the title of this article is Whisper Real Estate Listings Surge as Agents Battle Market Control. All right, now I'm just going to pause for just a second because this could be a kind of a divisive argument back and forth on regards to this topic. Okay, so we're going to have agents that are going to be on one side. We're going to have another agent's going to be on another. We're going to have an industry on one side, an industry on another. So let me just caution as we go through this article is my position is wait and see more than anything. I think the conversation is good. We need to be having this conversation. And just to add what this is all about exclusive listings, private listings. You can call them pocket listings. They're calling them whisper real estate listings, whatever, right? My thing would be wait and see, good conversation, need to be having these conversations. I think there's arguments to be had on either side of the aisle. I think they need to be handled delicately and being talked about, which I think is a good thing. So you're not going to hear from me kind of what my overall opinion is. I think it depends on the situation, right? I think there's arguments to be had. So I think this is a good conversation to have. And so as we read through these articles and we start talking about this situation, right? What I want you to do is just feel free to leave in the comments and throw it in there and give me your opinion. That's perfectly fine. I'm all for that. I love that. I mean, we'll hash that out. If you guys want to give your opinion in the comments, we can hash it out right here and there. That's great. But at the same time, just really, as I read through this, just think through the logistics of what this means and what this means for our industry and this conversation. And then I would go back to your brokerage and have these kind of conversations. You don't have to take a position, but talking about it, I think, is a good thing to do because there is a push and shove against portals versus private listings and this kind of stuff. So let's now, with me rambling on, let's actually get into the actual article here. Let me see if I can zoom in just a little bit now that I got past the ads. Okay, so it begins off with this. It says, across the U.S. housing market, a quiet but powerful trend is gaining momentum. They're calling it whisper listings, all right? Also known as pocket listings or off-market listings. These properties are promoted privately, often to a select list of buyers, agents, or eternal brokerage networks, rather than being broadly marketed on the multiple listing service, which is the MLS, as inventory remains tight in many regions and competition for quality homes stays intense. Whisper listings are surging, and with them comes a growing debate about who controls access to housing opportunities, okay? So this is the conversation. Now, this article here, I'm on MSN. I think, let's see, story by support101q.com. It seems like I read this article on a different website, like I think it's called like Peloton or something like that. Anyway, I was going to try to give a shout out to them. But this is on MSN, and that's just a news aggregate. It's not actually the source of the news article. But anyway, you get the idea about the conversation here, right? This is what we're talking about. Who controls access to listing opportunity and housing opportunities? Okay, that's the conversation. And it says this rise isn't just a tactical shift in how agents sell homes. It's becoming a battle over market transparency, consumer choice, and the role of brokers in shaping what buyers and sellers get to see. All right, it's going to elaborate here on what are whisper listings and why are they spreading. So again, whisper listings, private listings, exclusive listings, that's the conversation. It says a whisper listing is a home for sale that is marketed discreetly, sometimes before it hits the MLS and sometimes instead of ever being listed publicly. The marketing may happen through private emails, agent-to-agent text, internal brokerage platforms, exclusive client lists, private social media groups, or invite-only showings. Now, on the face value of this, when you read things like that, alarm bells go off, as they should, right? Because if that was the whole story, that would be nothing but alarming, right? It's like, oh wait, now we've got this exclusive thing going on. I've got to be part of this group, this agent to agent, network, and this internal brokerage platforms, and all these exclusive client lists and all these type of things, right? Now, I'm going to stop just 1 second and just focus in just a little bit here, because one thing that is true is this is a very, very small percentage of sales. Okay. So at the very beginning here, it might be gaining momentum, but in most cases, in almost every case that I know, real estate agents are not so interested in going this route overwhelmingly. Matter of fact, if you go into a listing appointment, most agents are wanting to get the home marketed out to as many people as possible, because agents do not make money unless they sell that property. So usually it could become a strategy. It can become a strategy for marketing for the seller, but really this as an option to the seller is typically generated by the seller wanting privacy, not necessarily by the agent wanting to promote it this way. Okay. Now, could that change? Sure, it could. If these private networks get stronger and stronger and stronger and they gain momentum, that could become a thing. So again, why we need to be having this conversation. But overwhelmingly, I would say this is not the common practice of agents. This is not how we work. Now, it says this: common reasons sellers choose whisper listings. All right, so here's the reasons. It says privacy concerns. So if a seller chooses to go this route as a private listing or exclusive office listing, here are some of the reasons why they would do so. Okay, so there's a privacy concern. Maybe they're a public figure, right? Maybe they are going through a divorce. Maybe it's part of an estate sale, right? Or maybe it's a personal safety issue. Okay, those are all legitimate reasons why someone might choose to go that route. Another strategy that we find inside of this is testing the market. By them being able to do this, it says right here, without accumulating days on market that may reduce the leverage. Now, I will say, testing the market, and then the argument they're making here where it says without accumulating days on market that may reduce leverage, that is one part of the argument. It's basically saying I don't want the days on the market to be attached to that property when I do go live, and I want to be able to protect that and not have that data out there. Okay, that could be part of the train of thought here, but I don't think that's the only way. Like when you're testing a market with a property, and in our offices, we'll do this. We'll do office tour, or like property tours, right? We'll do home tours. So our agents will get together and then they will go out and tour homes that are on the market. Now, testing the market could easily be, hey, we're going to have an exclusive, moment here of maybe 2 to 3 days where we want to give time to get all the marketing pieces together, allow the agents to come through and tour, give their opinions and critique the property, and then time for the seller to make those corrections, right? But at the same time, we still have a listing agreement on this property. We are going to be putting it on the market, but we want to try to figure out the best position that we can do to get it ready. Hey, Cassie, thank you so much for the rose. Appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for being here too. Appreciate you so much. But that's really when I start hearing the word testing the market, that is the concept I'm thinking of. I am thinking of it as along the line of like, how can I best position this home to get it ready to be sold, and be ready to be more presentable to the consumer at mass. Okay, so that's typically how that comes about. The next one is convenience. It says fewer showings, fewer interruptions, controlled access. Sometimes sellers' lives are so busy they don't want a mass amount of people. And maybe they're not as motivated to sell, and they just want to test the market out a little bit more to see what kind of traction they get at that listing price. All right, so that's another argument. And this is premium positioning, which is what I was kind of talking about. They say luxury properties where exclusivity is part of the brand. In other words, it's a way to kind of get everything together, and you create this big event, you invite people over, that kind of stuff. All right, so that's the reason for. It says why agents are leaning into off-market deals. It says in a competitive real estate environment, agents are under pressure to offer something special. Whether that's exclusive inventory for buyers or curated low-friction selling for homeowners, whisper listings can provide a sense of exclusivity and speed, but they also offer business advantages. So there's a major, and this is always going to be the case, right? Agents are constantly put in a position where they have to be proving their value back to the consumer. And they have to do that in a sea of other agents trying to do the exact same thing. So if I go into a listing appointment and I have my marketing plan, and my marketing plan is exactly like the next agent, what am I doing that's different? So this is a part where a lot of agents are leaning into this kind of concept and becoming very creative in the way that they structure this term whisper listings or private listings or office exclusive type listings to help leverage themselves to show what they do better for their clients than the other agent might do. Okay. So that is a good argument. Now, again, we're just focusing on the positives here. We'll get into the other side of the aisle here in just a second. All right. Key incentives for agents and brokerages: higher likelihood of dual representation. Okay. So that's a double ending. In other words, I'm a dual agent representing buyer and seller. The reality is these are very small and very micro percentages. Doesn't mean we don't pay attention, but that's not as really the main driving force behind that, in my opinion. Stronger client retention by promising early access to homes not yet on the MLS. Okay, more special attention, more focus on the actual clients coming in, and maybe even a better quality buyer. That's the argument. Faster transactions by negotiating with a limited pool of motivated buyers, and then more predictable outcomes by controlling showings, pricing conversations, and buyer selections. Okay, and this is talking about like bidding wars and that kind of stuff. Rapid sales are still common, and controlling the flow of listing becomes a competitive edge. Okay, so that is the argument for Michelle Tuttle. Thank you so much for being here. Good morning to you as well. Good to have you here. Thank you for tuning in. All right, now we get into the conversation here. We're going to be shifting gears just a little bit on kind of the risk and the effects of this. And this is the transparency problem. Okay, who gets left out? All right, so this is where the biggest criticism comes in regards to private listings and exclusive listings and what they're calling whisper listings, okay? It says the biggest criticism of whisper listings is that they can weaken market transparency. When homes are sold privately, fewer buyers get a chance to compete, and sellers may not receive the strongest possible offer. For buyers, especially first-time buyers or those without highly connected agents, off-market deals can feel like an exclusive club with a locked door. Now, that's all very true, right? This could become a thing if this became the norm practice. Now, I will make the argument this is not going to become the norm. Again, going back to what I said, agents are more concerned with turning property over than they are trying to control and represent these sellers in these private networks. Most agents want to get the property out to everybody as fast as they can. But in this statement, there's a couple things we want to note, right? And it says here, fewer buyers get a chance to compete and sellers may not receive the strongest possible offer. So if we stop there, if you are going into a listing presentation and you're talking to your seller and they're wanting to have privacy and that kind of stuff, we as agents do owe them an explanation on the risk of going that route. Okay, don't get caught in. If you are being motivated because you want to get both ends of the deal and you want to try to keep it exclusive and the brokerage is putting pressure on you to do more office exclusive because of that, those are kind of a little bit like red flags to me, because it's about the client. It shouldn't be about your pocketbook. And so if you're going into that meeting and the seller's being honest with you about wanting to have privacy and things like that, okay, great. We have an option to kind of address that. At least some do, right? But at the same time, we need to then tell them the risk of not putting it out there, right? We need to communicate that to them. Then the other part of this is like the first-time buyers that are not part of this exclusive, highly connected agent group. That's true, but here's what I would say is if this continues to grow momentum, if private listings and more agents are starting to develop some form of marketing that has a kind of a system inside of doing private listings, this is where as agents that represent buyers need to be networking with other agents more. That's where you need to be. Because if this is a thing and you know certain agents in your market that are doing this type of marketing where they have more private and more exclusives, if that is a thing in your market, then you need to be connecting with those agents. You need to get inside of that network. Agree or disagree with the model, right? That's fine. I'm not saying I agree with the model. I'm just saying, though, that if you know agents that are doing this in your market, then it behooves you to be in a relationship with those agents because they're going to have those properties, right? So you need to have those relationships, okay? All right. It says effects on buyers. Effects on sellers. Did I read? Yeah, effects on buyers. It says reduced access. Many buyers never learn a home is available. That's true, right? Information imbalance. Connected buyers gain early visibility while others wait for public listings. And then potential price inflation elsewhere. When fewer homes circulate publicly, the remaining MLS inventory can feel even tighter. So, and this is the argument, okay? And look, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, Zillow's great, right? I think there's a war to be had there, okay? not my battle. Pay attention, navigate it correctly. Yes. But here's the thing. One of the arguments that Zillow makes, and it pushes back against this, is the lack of integrity in the data. Okay, that's their position. We agree or disagree? I'm going to agree that if this became the norm, we lose pertinent information as far as the way we navigate our market as a whole. We lose very crucial information about homes. That if you're representing a buyer and you don't truly know how long it's been on the market, how long they've been trying to sell it, and what the original price listing was, and all this type of information, it does put your buyer at a disadvantage, right? It does put your buyer at a disadvantage. They don't know all the facts going into that home that they would know otherwise when it's being pushed out everywhere, okay? So that is a valid argument, especially if you represent buyers and you are a buyer, okay? So I agree with that. All right, effects on sellers, possibly fewer offers, which can reduce sale price in competitive neighborhoods, less market validation. And this is true too, right? Without broad exposure, it's harder to prove the home achieved maximum value. When you start doing CMAs, that data is now skewed. And if you're trying to come up with a listing price and you don't have all the information, well, that becomes even harder, right? It becomes way more difficult to be able to price homes if this becomes the norm. We lose data. Okay. Mispricing. We talked about that. All right. Are whisper listings legal? Rules, policies, and the gray areas? Look, there is some confusion here, and let's just pause because I can't give you any specific advice for all you watching. Okay. I can't do that because most of this is going to be under the compliance and requirements of your local MLS and association, right? If you are a realtor and you are part of a realtor association, they have requirements of what you can do in regards to being an agent and with listings and in regards to the MLS, right? So they're going to have different kinds of policies. National Association of Realtors has different policies for affiliated brokerages and agents. All right. So we do know a lot of this kind of stuff has been changing, and there's been a lot of verbiage that's been updated and things like that has happened. But here is where the article goes on to highlight some of where the confusion happens. Okay. So some of the confusion happens is the coming soon versus off market. Okay. That's two verbiage. Some sellers want to delay showings, but still plan to list publicly. So going to your local MLS and association and figuring out that term. What does coming soon mean? What does off the market mean? Right? What do these terms mean? Then there's the next one. It says office exclusives. It says some MLS rules allow limited marketing within a brokerage, but prohibit public promotion without MLS entry. Okay. So you can have like a certain amount of days that you can have an office exclusive, but you cannot market the property. And if you do market the property, it's then required to go onto the MLS and be marketed for all to have it, to see it and be able to know it's available. Right. So there's some rules there. Social media marketing. It says posting a private listing publicly while avoiding MLS rules can trigger compliance issues. This is where we got the pros and the cons, and the whole argument of one way or the other, and you might land on one side or the other. I think there's an argument on both sides. But as realtors, not just real estate agents, but as realtors, we have these things to adhere to. How does coming soon work? How does off market work? What is office exclusive? How do we market these properties that are office exclusive without, triggering any kind of compliance issue that we might have, right? These are the arguments we need to have, and we need to be very familiar if we're going to try to do some kind of creative marketing in regards to these type of categories to make sure we fully understand how these work and not get ourselves into trouble. But at the end, remember, it's the consumer. We are focused on the consumer, always the consumer. Let's see. I'm going to skip down just a little bit here. It says, okay, why whisper listings are surging now? And that's a good question. Why is it that all of a sudden we are having this conversation? And I've noticed that it is popping up everywhere. I mean, I'm hearing whisper listing, pocket listings, exclusives, all this kind of stuff. Everywhere we go, this is kind of becoming the topic. All right. So several forces are converging to make off-market activity more attractive. Okay. So here is what they're saying. Low inventory hangover. Many regions still face limited supply compared to buyer demand. Okay. Rate sensitivity. Some sellers hesitate to move, reducing listing volume and increasing competition for desirable homes. Agent competition. Agents differentiate themselves by offering access to exclusive opportunities, and digital networking, private groups, CRM lists, and internal platforms make whisper marketing easier than ever. So we got a technology situation going on. We got a housing affordability issue going on. We got an inventory issue going on. And here's what happens when anytime there is a shift. And I've been doing this for I think this I'm on my 21st year now of real estate. I've been through the Great Recession, if you will, back of 2006 to 2009, right? And anytime you go through a major shift in a housing market and any one of the balancing acts shifts, right? You got a buyer market, you go to a seller market, you got inventory, you got less inventory. Anytime these type of shifts begin to happen, that transitional period is confined. And when things get confined, people get creative and start trying to figure out ways to best promote and still make sales. It's just the way we have to do it. Now, good and bad happens inside of these pressure moments, and that's what we find. So this conversation is happening for many reasons. And one, I think, is to do more with the digital side of things. You know, back in the day, it was easy. You had the MLS, everybody accessed that. Then we started syndicating the MLS out to all of the portals, Zillow and everybody else. So then the consumer had access to all of that information, right? So now they had all the information. Agents then had to reevaluate their value proposition. It's not me just controlling the data and then, giving them the data. And so now you've got this pushback a little bit on the brokerage industry, like, hey, look, we're giving away every bit of our information that gives our agents leverage to be able to negotiate and represent clients. And then in some ways, making the argument that we're jeopardizing sellers. So that's why we're here. So you got this point of tension in the housing market where creativity needs to flourish and certain things need to happen. You've got the digital networking capabilities now that technology is just embedded everywhere. You got AI working on every single tool out there. So you've got all this shifting going on. So where does this land? We don't know, right? But that's why we're having it. We're having this pressure because of all those shifting things in our market that's causing people to be more creative and look for creative ways to move property more. So that's why we're here. It says whisper listings may be a good fit for you if you need privacy, high-profile seller-sensitive situation security concerns, controlled showings with vetted buyers, a quick, low-friction sale at a price you are comfortable with. MLS exposure may be better if you want maximum competition and the highest possible price, clear market validation, multiple offers, strong demand indicators, broad buyer reach, including relocation buyers and those using major listing portals. All right, so you get the idea. The bottom line, they said here, is control versus choice in the modern housing market. We got who controls the information, and we got, does the consumer have the choice, and does the agent have any kind of control, right? So there is just a tension. That's where we're at, okay? That's where we're at. So let me give you just some summaries of what I would say in a shifting market like this, because like I said at the very beginning, when I start this show, I have an opening line that I say, the intro that I say, and it's I don't just rampantly just throw that out there. I'm very much in agreement that this is the way it is when we start seeing major shifts where there's a confliction there between the markets and tension, what we see is opportunity. Now we have to be able to look inside of these shifts and what is the opportunity? Where is this at? All right. So what I would absolutely do is if I was going in to do a listing presentation right now, I don't know if the consumer, the seller themselves is, first of all, they're not going to understand whisper listings and pocket listings. They're not going to know what any of that is, right? So first and foremost, they're probably not going to have that conversation. But they will start saying things like, man, I just don't know if that price is good. Or, man, I don't want my neighbor to know that I'm listing my home, right? They're going to have verbiage like this. They're going to, and they always have. So what we need to be aware of is what is the options, given the state of our local policies with our local associations, what is it that is legally allowed to happen that I can leverage to better serve the client and what they're talking about. Now, I'm not talking about going in to a listing appointment and doing a listing presentation and just flipping through a bunch of slides. Sure, prove your value. But what I'm saying is when you're sitting down and you're listening to what they're saying to you and they're making comments, understand what is going on in the market and what opportunities are being presented to you to help you navigate them, right? So I would be paying attention, understanding what is allowed, what is not allowed, and so forth, and then helping the seller to navigate that. It doesn't have to be that you agree or disagree with one thing or the other, but there's opportunity right now to leverage what we are allowed to leverage. And you should, because your other competitor is going to be doing that, right? Don't compromise your own morals and your own integrity, what you think is right or wrong. Not saying that, but at the same time, serve your client well, pay attention to what their needs are, and try to meet them where they are. Okay. Now, another thing that I would absolutely do here, though, is regardless on which side of the aisle that you agree with this, if you agree with having pocket listings and exclusive office listings, great. If you don't agree with that, fine, right? Doesn't matter to me. But what I will say is right now, it is a thing. And in your market, there are agents that are doing this. They have a system. And I said it earlier, is you need to if you need to know the agents in your market that market homes in this way. And instead of being upset with them and saying, well, how dare they, I hate that they do that, and grumbling about that agent, right? Especially if that agent is doing what is allowed, regardless if you agree or disagree with them. The best thing you can do is get to know that agent, get inside of their network, talk to them, take them out to coffee, whatever, and say, hey, look, I understand you got a marketing strategy, maybe not my way of doing it, but that's what you do or whatever. But I would like to talk to you and get to know you and know what properties you have. I would love to be able to bring my buyers to your properties if I can. Having that kind of conversation, because this is ramping up. It's being talked about in the real estate arena. So we need to listen and pay attention and be having these conversations with other agents. Don't build a silo. Don't be judgmental. Get in there and just use the tools and resources that you have. I then would absolutely educate the sellers. If you've got a seller and you're thinking about going this office exclusive direction or one way or the other, be honest with them. Break down. We just talked about all the pros and cons of what it is to either go exclusive or go mass marketing. Have that honest conversation with them. The risk of the pros and cons of privacy versus maximum market exposure. Have that conversation with them, right? So, Lucas, thank you for being here. Maurice is just Maurice. Thank you for watching as well. I do appreciate you guys taking the time to check in today. All right. And then finally, I would just simply say, get very familiar with what your local MLS and association rules are in regards to these type of systems. Okay. All right. Very good. That was the first article. Holy moly. All right. This next one here, this is, these next articles are actually really short. This is sellers kind of questioning the traditional marketing, the way that real estate agents kind of do marketing. And so this is an article based in Wisconsin. It came across my feed today and I was like, you know what, this might be something just to kind of throw out there and kind of get you guys thinking about this, maybe some discussion later about this too. But it says this, more Wisconsin home sellers question traditional real estate marketing models. Okay. More of them are questioning real estate marketing models. It says most agents rely on outdated listing tactics. It says one Southwest Wisconsin real estate advisor shows how targeting the right buyers puts sellers back in control. Let me see if I can, man, this is going to be hard, guys. I'm sorry, those on TikTok, I can't share my screen. I keep getting flagged for that. I'm going to try to zoom in, at least on the YouTube and other platforms here so we can see the article. And those watching on TikTok, guys, I'm going to read and elaborate for you guys as well. So just, it's okay. I'm sorry. It says Wisconsin real estate advisor shares expert perspective on why home sellers are growing frustrated. It says Southwest Wisconsin, Madison, Verona home sellers across Southwest Wisconsin are expressing increasing frustration with the traditional real estate process. And according to local industry experts, the issue may have less to do with market conditions and more to do with how homes are being marketed. Now, what's going to happen here? And this kind of goes back to what we're talking about. There's a tension here. Homes are sitting on the market for a long period of time and they're not selling, and home sellers are getting frustrated. And as agents, we fall into the trap where we think that we can just go into the listing appointment and then throw it on the MLS and maybe make a social media post about it. And we've done enough, right? That's our marketing, right? And the reality is there's no differentiating you from any other agent out there. So this is where the tension is coming at. Sellers are not dumb. Okay. They have more access to information, right? They can go on YouTube right now and don't be naive to think that a person is thinking about selling their house have not thought about doing it themselves. Okay. Almost all of them have done that because they're going to be saving a lot of money. So they think. by doing so, right? So they have went down that road. And because they go down that road, guess where they end up? They end up on Google, they end up on YouTube, and they listen to all these gurus telling them how to do things. Now, as a real estate agent, you go in and you do a listing presentation. The other agent goes in and does a listing presentation. And every single one of you guys said the exact same thing about your marketing, right? They're left there sitting going, I mean, I could do that, right? Zillow allows me to post it on there. It goes everywhere, right? So this is the pushback. This is the argument. It's like, is that enough? Is that going to be enough to keep sellers happy? He says, this is according to Jeremy Fishnick, a licensed home inspector. Okay, now he's a home inspector, and real estate advisor based in Southwest Wisconsin. Many sellers enter the process assuming their agent has a clear marketing plan, only to later realize that listing and marketing are often treated as the same thing. Listing and marketing, they put it in the same category. In other words, I listed it, right? Therefore, it's now everybody else is marketing it for me. All right. He said, what frustrates sellers isn't effort, it's the lack of strategy. All right. Many homes are listed and exposed, but not intentionally marketed. Sellers feel that gap when results fall short of expectations. All right. Fishnick notes that homeowners today are more informed than in past market cycles. Okay, we talked about that. Says, according to Fishnick, traditional real estate practices often emphasize exposure, placing a home on the multi-listing service and waiting for interest rather than identifying, okay, pay attention, identifying, targeting, and motivating specific buyer segments. Now, there are three things inside of this that we need to be very familiar with in our markets, okay? If we're going out and we're going to be really good listing agents and we want to represent and help sell properties, there are certain things we need to understand about our local market, all right? We need to look at that home under the eyes of the buyer for that home. I'm not just going to go out and list a house, throw it on the market, and then hope somebody comes. I'm going to try to position that home marketing-wise to the demographic that it best meets. And that means I'm going to target that market, right? I'm then going to have specific verbiage in the marketing and specific ads designed in a certain way to appeal to that demographic or that segment that is interested in that home, right? I'm not just going to list it and do like what I do for every single one of my properties. I'm going to be way more intentional with paying attention to what that property is and who it's best for. And then I'm going to tailor my marketing strategy around that. That comes from, knowing in certain areas. Like let's say you see in your MLS data that most families own a $200,000 house and they're buying a $300,000 house because they start having kids in your market. All right. And maybe you've got a 4-bedroom listing house and they live in a 3-bedroom house, and knowing that person is in a 3-bedroom house at $200,000 that is wanting to move to the 4-bedroom house at $300,000, guess what? You know where to take your marketing abilities to into those subdivisions and talking to them or tenants or wherever they might be renting on the cost factor, and going in front of them and presenting to them and say, look, you have kids and you got this and XYZ or whatever, this might be good for you, right? And having that conversation and presenting it that way. It might be going into Facebook and having targeting ads that address that demographic. Now, you got to be careful, fair housing. Just keep that in mind. All right, he points to a growing awareness among sellers that effective marketing requires more than visibility, preparation, positioning, and risk management. Risk management is a big factor too. Play a significant role in shaping buyer perception and negotiating leverage. An inspector's perspective on seller frustration. He says, as a licensed home inspector, Fishnick brings a perspective not commonly associated with real estate advisory roles. He says many frustrations arise after inspections, renegotiations, or unexpected repair requests. Now, who agrees with that? Give me a thumbs up in the comments, because that is true, right? That is absolutely what happens. What kills deals more than anything? It's that inspection period. It's the renegotiation after the inspections, and it's absolutely under the unexpected repair request that the seller gets frustrated in, right? These situations that could often be mitigated earlier in the process. Sellers are frustrated when problems surface late. By then, leverage has already shifted. Early clarity changes the entire tone of a transaction. Now, this is where the argument would come in, is like a pre-inspection, that kind of stuff. Again, this is one of those argumentable things. Like some agents love to advise their seller to go out and do a pre-home inspection so they know what the issues are with their home and what they need to do to fix it and that kind of stuff. The other ones say, I don't really want to do that because it opens them up to understand more about the property. Therefore, they have to disclose more about it. I think being aware of your seller and the situation is just a good service, right? if you think and you look at that property and you feel like it's a good advice to advise the homeowner to go and get a home inspection done so they can address the core problems and issues with that home that will help position that home to sell, it's probably the right advice, right? It's probably the right advice. So again, if you can address a lot of those issues before you get under contract and before the renegotiation of repairs takes place, then you're in a much better position to sell that property. He says, while market conditions fluctuate, Fishnick believes seller confidence improves when expectations, preparation, and marketing strategy are aligned from the beginning. Most sellers don't want hype, Fishnick said. They want to understand what's happening, why it's happening, and how to avoid unnecessary surprises. So there's a lot kind of in that just to kind of get us thinking through this. And we need to be, as real estate agents, looking at our marketing strategy of homes. And I understand we want to go out and get as many listings as we possibly can. And we have to keep, being aggressive and going out, door knocking or whatever, expireds, everything we possibly can. But I would encourage you to take some time to get to know the demographics of your local market. Understand who's buying where and where people are maneuvering, because that's ultimately going to lead you in the direction of being able to sell more properties and ultimately represent that listing much, much better, right? I think that's a good thing. So what would I kind of take away from this, right? I would work into your listing presentation, listing conversation, whatever, a marketing list that clearly defines the ROI, the return on investment of each of the services of marketing that you provide, okay? So if you are an agent that hires professional photos, professional video, professional drone, if you're an agent that hires and, floor plans being made or square footage being accurate by an outside source measurements, you have a entire Instagram, Facebook, YouTube reach, then how do you present that stuff on those platforms? How do you build and purchase ads and you stream those out, and what demographic does that look like? And getting into the nitty gritty of what you do to market that property. Take some time and build that list out. Think through how you market properties. Go online. I'm telling you, there's so much research out there on how certain agents market properties that you could probably quickly come to some kind of form of system and process on what you do for each property type that you list. There's so much information out there, and for crying out loud, you also got AI. I mean, AI's got endless amount of information. Make it your own, but it's out there. All right. And then, to be honest, and people gripe at me about this all the time. My own agents, I don't like being in front of camera. I don't like the way I sound, this kind of stuff. I understand. But I'm going to encourage you is I would record a video, post it on your social media somewhere. I encourage everybody to get a YouTube channel. I think it's a good service to have, guys. But I would record a video explaining the difference between listing a home and marketing a home and going through the marketing plan we just talked about as one of your action items, right? Going back through that and like, here's what I do to market a home. Think about how valuable of a video that is, right? So when you're going into a listing appointment and you leave that listing appointment, if you had a video series that you could then send on drip campaign that they can see after you're gone, talking about how you market their home, that's going to go really far, right? Now you got to deliver on the marketing thing. Don't just go in and make a bunch of promises you can't deliver on. All right. And I would also do this. I think it's becoming more common practice. Maybe not. I encourage all my agents to do listing presentations and design those type of things. But the reality is I don't like the idea of just slides. I think you incorporate that into a consultative type conversation, right? Having that up, talking them through that, and having a conversation and paying them very much attention to what their goals are. It goes back to the previous article and what we were talking about, but you're paying attention to their needs. And at the same time, you're listening to how they've lived in the house, what they've done to the house, and don't just focus on the pitch, right? Don't just pitch everything that you do and how great you are. Make sure that if you're pitching, you're offering value back to them that correlates to them, right? And I'm not saying don't talk about your accolades and what you've accomplished. I think there's a time and place for that. But that cannot be the selling factor, because I've known a lot of sellers list with brand new licensed agents, and those brand new licensed agents are really good and have no credentials behind their name. They just do a great job going in and having a conversation, right? Jessica Vincent, she says, thank you for the comment too. Let me highlight this real quick. She says, I advise sellers often to do it but I've only had 2 follow through with doing it. But in both, we sold at asking and no issues. There, yeah, good. So she's talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jessica, but she's talking about doing the pre-inspection. And I think that's what you're talking about, is the pre-inspection, having the inspection done and getting stuff kind of taken care of before you go to market. Let me know if that's it. But that's the thing, right? I mean, you're going to have some success with this. And the more properties you go into and the more issues you see, the more you begin to be aware if this person needs to be doing a pre-inspection, right? Like you begin to see those signs. And I will say this, is a lot of times when you got a seller that is not being realistic on their price, that is pretty much a good idea because you're noticing something and you need a third party to come in and validate that and address the issues that sometimes they're not wanting to listen to you on. So you need another professional to come in. So that could be a very, very good practice, right? So Jessica, thank you so much. Let me know in the comments if that was correct. If that's what you're referring to. I think so, but very good. Okay, 2 more articles, and this we're gonna burn through these guys. This right here is by, oh, I'm sorry, I did not, yeah, I did mention where this other one was from. I did, okay. This is Realtor.com. It's under their finance category by Anna Bullock, February 1st, 2026. Now, this is not typically what I would have a conversation with on this channel, because this is gonna be more directed at those that have paid off a mortgage and advice for how to process this after you've paid off your mortgage and what that looks like and the thought process behind that. But the reason why I'm bringing this up on this channel, this is actually not off topic, because when you start talking about clients and retention and offering value and all those type of things, this is a factor, right? Sometimes we fall into the trap where we've already sold the house and now the person's paid off their home and they've been there for 20 years. They're not really going to list with me, and you don't market to them anymore. You kind of just forget about them. And the reality, though, is that client that you sold the house to that's lived in there for a long time, maybe has paid off their mortgage. Guess what you just did? You sold them a house of their dreams. They have now bought the house that they're going to live in and maybe even die in, right? So you accomplished something. So if anybody's going to give you a referral, it would be them, right? So let's don't forget about what I call our legacy clients, right? The clients that maybe years and years ago they bought from us. We've been in this industry for any amount of time. You have those people. And they live in these homes still. And maybe they've sold off their house, or maybe they've paid off their mortgage, right? And they know other people and they love how you represented them, and they just need to be reminded of that. This is a good touch point to go back to them and remind them of some of these things. So let's go through this real quick, because this is all about just kind of like thought ideas when you do pay off the mortgage and things to be aware of if you do. All right. So, and I will say, anybody that's paid off your mortgage, well done. Good job. Excellent job. You've now entered into a financial freedom that most people don't get to experience in their lifetime. And that debt-free asset becomes amazing. Jessica, yeah, no, you're fine. I'm glad you, Jessica was clarifying that it was about the pre-inspection. So yeah, no worries. Yeah, thank you. I thought that was what you're talking about. Just want to make sure. All right, so it says owning a home free and clear is a dream for many Americans. And over 40% of them, it's already a reality. 40%, guys, 40%. That's crazy. I actually just read that. I think it was last week. We went over like home ownership and value and of equity, and that number came up as well. It was like 40 or 39.8 or something like that. If you're part of this group of people who have paid off their mortgage, congratulations. Now that you own your home outright, it's time to reap the benefits and focus on other goals. All right, so this is where, as agents, there is some information here that I would say go back into your legacy clients and send them this, right? Maybe they paid it off, and just send up an email and just say, hey, maybe you've paid off your mortgage by now. If not, no worries, I'm sorry. But like, here's some ideas if you have, right? It says what to do after you've paid off your mortgage. Once you no longer have a monthly house payment, the most important thing you can do is keep lifestyle creep in check. Lifestyle creep in check. In other words, I paid off my mortgage, all this free extra cash, and now I'm going to go out and figure out other debt or something else I'm going to get myself into, right? So that is a risk. Because the risk of being mortgage free is falling back into debt simply because it's easy. Paying your home off takes discipline. Whatever you do, don't undo your financial win by replacing it with something new. Great advice, guys. Like, don't live in debt. Like, try to get out of debt. And once you are out of debt, man, just sit back and just enjoy that moment, right? Just enjoy that moment. There's nothing wrong with getting a boat or starting that vacation fund, but understand that once you take on a new payment, you've sacrificed some of the freedom you just created. Sorry, I gotta re-trigger TikTok here to let them know I'm still here. Unable to verify. There we go. All right. If you don't have a concrete financial plan in place, your money may take on a life of its own and in time be gone with the wind. Sit down and make a plan. So I would absolutely recommend anybody that, and to be honest, if you've not talked to a financial planner, go talk to one. It doesn't matter what phase of life you're in. Go talk to one. Sit down with them, talk to them about your finances, show them what's going on, let them help you make really important decisions when it comes to like 401ks, life insurance policies, paying off certain things, rolling money over here, mutual funds, stock investments, all those type of things, right? Go and sit down with somebody and have a conversation. If you have paid off your mortgage, you should absolutely do that, right? You need to be leveraging the money that you're saving into building something up for your retirement. From there, leverage any tax advantage retirement accounts such as 401ks and IRAs. If possible, max those out. Then create a bank account for home improvements and repairs. I'm not going to give any financial advice. That is not my arena. That's what the article is saying. That's not coming from me. I would suggest you go and you talk to a financial planner. Okay? So here's the thing. We suggest you set aside 1% to 2% of your home's value per year or more if you know more expenses are on the horizon. So in other words, a hedge fund there to protect against loss. Don't forget to budget for property taxes and home insurance so you don't get hit with surprise bills or late fees. Okay, so this is probably a big one here, to be honest. I've actually run into this with some. People forget that when they pay off their mortgage, their insurance and property taxes were escrowed in. And once you pay off your mortgage, they're not escrowed in anymore. So you're going to get a bill. Now, most people know this, but I have seen this happen where people have paid off their mortgage and they forgot their property tax bill. And they just assumed because for 20 years, they would get that bill and they just didn't do anything with it. They just saw it and like, oh, it's on the mortgage. If you paid off your mortgage, guess what? That's not been paid. So don't lose your house to the government. So yeah. Once your mortgage is gone, you're still completely responsible for these expenses. Yeah. Lastly, think about estate planning. You may want to consider putting your house into a land trust so your beneficiaries don't have to worry about going through the long, expensive probate process. Again, I would go and consult an attorney, have them talk to you about what that process looks like. How do you put a house or a property into land trust? That's good advice, guys. That is good advice. So if you have paid it off, that is worth a conversation. Go talk to an attorney, your financial planner, CPA, and all that kind of stuff. Begin to have that conversation. If you are debt-free and you've paid off your mortgage, go do that because you will save your beneficiaries a massive headache. If you're a real estate agent, you know, and you've dealt with this kind of stuff in probate, you know the difficulties of it, right? Help yourself, help your loved ones not to have to go through that. Very, very good advice, right? All right, so there's a lot in this, but again, if you paid off your mortgage, again, congratulations. Those listening that are almost there, trying to get there, keep going, keep pressing on. Amazing. Now let's talk about it let's put our real estate agent hat back on and think about opportunity inside of this where we can reach out to our past clients. And I've already kind of touched on this, right? So if, again, going back to my whole conversation about legacy clients, if you have those and you can validate that those people are either really close or have paid it off, why not create in your CRM, a list of, legacy clients, long-term relationship clients, whatever you want to call them. And then inside of there, just draft up an email that talks about like a mortgage, like what it's like to be free of a mortgage checklist, like things that you need to be aware of once you pay off your home, right? What does that look like? And then send that out just as a reminder, hey, just if you have paid off your mortgage, here's something to think about and make sure you don't forget these things, right? And then I would also, if you don't have in your vendor list a local tax professional, financial planner, an attorney, and all those kind of stuff, I would go out and have those kind of conversations. I would go out and find those people, start talking to them about the benefits of paying off the mortgage, what to do once you do, and going through that. Maybe if you do, again, I'm going to tell you, lean into having a YouTube channel or Facebook or whatever, providing value back. Why not interview them and talk to them about the benefits of this? Or even at the very least, if you don't like to get on camera and video and all that kind of stuff, that's fine. But just send them a quick little Q&A or something, right? Say, hey, would you mind if I sent you, your tax professional, financial planner, whatever, would you mind if I sent you a quick Q&A that I can send out to my clients, giving them the best advice about how to handle their money and just different situations, right? And have that person fill out that Q&A and then take that Q&A, throw it into AI and let it create some drip campaigns for you addressing each one of those topics, right? Maybe some social media posts for this. Again, when I started thinking about value that we provide real estate agents, as real estate agents to our consumer, I'm not saying you don't promote yourself on social media and listings you got, but guys, I got to be honest. And I'm sorry, this is a little bit of a soapbox. If your entire social media is all about you and all of your accolades, I think you're missing the boat massively there. I don't think I don't think you are building a referral business like you think you are. I think you're building a business where you have to consistently be aggressive in your marketing. I think you've got a model that's going to lead to burnout. You've got a model that is dependent upon how much you can brag to keep generating new business. I don't think the referral business cares so much. They don't care about your accolades. They care about what you provide and the value you give them to help them navigate a very difficult situation. So when I sit here and I talk about this and I'm pulling this kind of stuff out, and I'm talking about talking to tax professionals and attorneys and letting them give advice, that is good social media content. When I say content, it's content directed at helping the consumer. You become the professional then that person wants to recommend you, even if you don't keep the hype up, right? I get it. It could be a slower growth. It could be a slower process to get to the point of the business you're looking for, because the aggressive, always in your face type marketing, and I'm not saying it's bad. There's a place where you should kind of brag a little bit about some of your accolades, but the reality is that should only be about 10 to 15 to 20% of your marketing. The rest of it should be based on valuing back to the consumer. Anyway, that's my soapbox, guys. I'm a relational person at its core. That's the way I do business. That's what I care about. And I'm just trying to encourage you guys that that's how you build a long, growing company that's here for the long haul. And it's one that you can pass on to somebody else. It is one that you can bring up the next generation and pull in and help them walk alongside you and teach them, and then turn that over to them, right? That's what you need to be doing. That is very, very crucial in longevity of a business. It really, really is. I've seen burnout happen so much. All right. Anyway, there we go. Oh gosh, I'm sorry. It is a soapbox moment. All right. This is the final one. This is now we're going to, from that soapbox moment into something more fun, a little more fun. Thank you guys for being here. I hope you guys have value out of this. And it's helpful for you guys. I really do pray that is the case. That's why I'm doing this. All right. This is by Realtor.com again. It's under the category unique homes. And every once in a while, I'll kind of pop in here and just kind of see what's happening. And you can too. I think it's kind of fun. If you go to Realtor.com and let's see, where did I go for this? Oh yeah, news and insights. And then should be like, I thought it was in this list. Oh yeah, right here. See, it says unique homes. Sorry, TikTok again, you can't see this, but if you go to Realtor.com, at the top bar, at the top right, it says news and insights, and down in news, there's unique homes. Man, it's kind of fun to go through this. You can see some really crazy places, but this one stood out. Just because if you're on the East Coast, and well, as far as that matter, all the way from Texas up, you got hit by ice and snow, and you're still covered up in some of that. And then the East Coast got hammered again by this Easterner snowstorm and all these type of things. So the conversation of being like off the grid and being self-sufficient and self-sustaining has surged. And that's a big swath of America that got hit by this. So I just felt like, hey, this is probably a topic that's going to circle around into our industry and is going to have real estate housing effects, right? So then I came across this article here, this home. So here it is. It says off-grid earthship. And I'm sorry, TikTok, that you guys can't see this. I really am. It's a weird looking house. And I might look, I'm gonna try to share this. It won't. Okay. Now look, I'm going to get flagged. All right. So you guys enjoy this. All right. So this is the off-grid earthship home capable of running without any public utilities, lists in Colorado. And look at the price. I mean, it's still a lot of money, but not as much as you think. $800,000, right? And this is in Colorado Springs. This is an earthship home in Colorado Springs, Colorado, designed to be completely independent from public utilities, has just landed on the market for $800,000. I just noticed, like, my head is so close inside of this. Can I zoom out on TikTok? I don't think I can. Anyway, just look at my forehead, guys. Just look at my forehead. Michelle, thank you so much. I appreciate it. She said it's always great information from you. I appreciate you being here and taking the time out of your day to join me too. Thank you so much. All right, it says built in 2000, the energy efficient residence boasts a plethora of thoughtful, self-sustaining features, including a brand new, fully owned solar system, a tankless water heater, and 2 different heating options to warm the entire property, helping to not only keep the dwelling running in all conditions, but also keep utility costs at an impressively low rate. I mean, you guys can kind of see this thing. Like Earthship might be kind of a good name. Looks like a bunker to me. Anyway, but this is not the rustic cabin that many might think of when imagining this kind of off-grid retreat. In fact, it comes equipped with many very modern amenities, including high-speed fiber optic internet service. It is a perfect marriage of modern convenience with natural beauty, courtesy of an incredibly unique design that brings the great outdoors into all the living space in more ways than one. The home has an indoor pond, guys, and built-in planter beds throughout. This is listed by Tyler Horner of the Innovative Group LLC. He says it also has active and passive solar with a 100-foot wall of windows that flood the interior with natural light. That's not it. Here we go. There's a picture of it there. Yeah, so there's one of the beds there, and then there's the natural light just pouring in. In some ways, it kind of like if you like Lord of the Rings, it kind of reminds me of like a Hobbit hole without the circled doors. Yeah, look at the greenery. I mean, there's so much nature inside of this home. The curved walls and beams, very, very cool. I mean, look at this planter box, just amazing. See, I love homes. I would love to go through this house and just see it. It says a cozy living room also features views of the 5-acre property. So $800,000 sits on 5 acres. And this is in Colorado Springs. This is actually kind of wild, really. The property's very design was also conceived with sustainability at the forefront of its creation. Yeah. It says Earthship homes are best known from their unique use of upcycled materials during construction, such as recycled plastic bottles, cardboard, aluminum cans, and even automobile tires. Wow. The sellers bought it in 2022 and have done a lot of updates since then. Yeah, so there's another picture. There's a kitchen. So I like this. They've kind of maintained the curvature of the counter to go along with the curvature of the walls. And if you look over to the far left here, you can kind of see the curvature of the wall. That is a good mix use there of materials to blend it all in. Even the planter box has a curvature to it. So, and you know, you could quickly, go over this and be like, wow, it's just kind of square. But those subtleties make it look a little bit more natural, a little more organic. So I think that's a good touch. A lot of angles there going on. Look at that triangle window. Plumbing right there in the wall. I mean, it's quirky. I mean, I gotta give it. It's a little quirky, guys. Big beam coming through. This is probably the master. This is the primary bedroom, has a skylight and hanging swing. Cool touch on the mirror. You notice that it's not just all square. They've actually made sure they got some a curvature to the mirror. That's good. That's a good touch. I think that's kind of it. I wanted to end with something a little bit more lighthearted and stuff. And it's coming to the end of the show, guys. I've tarried on quite amount of length of time. Let me go back to full screen on TikTok. There we go. Awesome. Thank you guys for being here. I do greatly appreciate this. I do hope you got some value out of today. My goal is to, even though I'm like reading through the news, it can be kind of boring. The goal here is really to, as we read through these type of things together, that we're building a community of people, of agents that doesn't just read news and then panics and regurgitate what the news says, but takes their time to kind of read through it and pull out the truth in it, and then also find the opportunity and leverage that in your business. And hopefully that's what I'm succeeding here doing. That is the ultimate goal. At the same time, it's also just a good process for myself with my role with the company I'm with and what I do for agents. Is this helps me stay on point for them as well. And that's really another part of why I do this too. So anyway, thank you guys for being here. Let's wrap up the show. That is your real estate brief for today. So if you did find this helpful, please do consider hitting the like button, the follow, and subscribing. That tells YouTube that you would like more of this type of content. Same with TikTok. If you're engaging with this type of content on that platform, it suggests more of this. So then that platform just gets a little bit better for you. And it's not altruistic. It also helps me as well. So please consider subscribing to this and join this community of real estate agents and professionals that we are truly focused on building a business that is relationship focused first. And that is the goal. And now there's always so much more I could talk about, but it is 9:45. It's getting late in the day. I got to jump onto another meeting. So with that being said, I will see you tomorrow back where you're watching it now, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time, and we will see you there. Thank you for tuning in. Really appreciate it.